Hi, Misha here. I have another British jet to show you, and this is actually my second one from the company Aviation72, which seems to have purchased a good bit of the old Witty machines and tooling. This is the de Havilland Sea Vixen, also known as the DH110, DH110, all-weather fleet defense or fleet interceptor fighter used by the Royal Navy in the 1960s. Now, I don't have this one on the stand. These come with actually quite nice stands. They're, again, kind of the old design from Witty or any of that. But for some reason, because it has this kind of tripod footprint, it does not like to stand on the spinny thing here. In fact, I already knocked it over once, and I got lucky where nothing really broke, I think. But I don't want to risk it again, so no stand for right now. And just for comparison, and kind of to kick us off, we have de Havilland's older Vampire here. This was the second jet fighter to go into production in England, and de Havilland's first, and it was a one engine. As you see, it has the split boom. This model is also 1/72 scale, so you can tell it's a smaller jet. And this one is from Corgi, our friends that do all the cool British stuff. This is kind of where de Havilland got started. After getting this in the air, they asked the Royal Navy, the Admiralty, what they might want in their next kind of all-weather or night fighter jet. That was in 1946. They kind of get an idea. And in 1947, both the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force expressed interest and ordered prototypes. And so they started off with the Vampire and Venom, which Venom was the all-weather version, and would develop it into what would become the Vixen, keeping the same kind of tail boom system. But originally, the prototype would be armed with 4 30mm cannons. It would be capable of transonic speeds, obviously able to launch from carriers. It would be a 2-seat, since they needed a second person to manage the radar and weapons, and of course a pilot. 2-engine, since they wanted it to have redundancy over the ocean. But in 1949, the Navy went with another de Havilland design, the Sea Venom, because the plane was more or less all ready to go. It was a known quantity model. It would be faster and cheaper to put into service. And at the same time, the Royal Air Force cut its order of prototypes from 4 to 2. So military interest was really waning on this design when 1950 rolled around. Nevertheless, de Havilland persevered, and in September of 1951, the first prototype flew, and by 1952, the second prototype was also making flights. Unfortunately, that year, the first prototype, while kind of showing off in the air, doing some aerobatics and showing that the plane could actually go supersonic in a dive, broke apart and killed the pilot, and also killed some bystanders on the ground from debris. This obviously put a halt to the program, and the second prototype was redesigned after the first wreckage was inspected. Nevertheless, again not deterred, the second prototype, vastly redesigned and updated, flew again in July of 1954 and was kind of back on track a bit. The new design was a little slower. It couldn't go transonic in a dive, kind of for obvious reasons, but it had many updates to the frame and tail and flaps and everything. Well, more bad news. In 55, the Royal Air Force selected the Gloucester Javelin as its next kind of all-weather night fighter type, radar-equipped plane, which was also a two-seater, which I've done a video on, and that plane is from Aviation72 as well, so that's kind of cool. But the Royal Navy changed their mind in February of that year. The Sea Venom was kind of always seen as an interim step and never a real permanent solution, not a real modern design. So the Navy turned right around and ordered 110 of the new plane. And so de Havilland would work on a navalized version with the first prototype of that released in the summer of 55. They would work with it. They would have a second prototype. They would do some carrier trials, blah, 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 blah. By 1957, the first production Vixen, first designated FAW-20 for fighter all-weather, came off the assembly line, and the first Vixen squadron in the Air Fleet Arm was organized and ready to go by July of 1959, and at this time this was renamed again to FAW-1, Fall 1, and went into service. The production model would honestly just be made for missiles and bombs and rockets. The cannons would be removed. It was the first Royal Navy fighter to not have cannon. It's kind of interesting. It's quite long, at over 55 feet. Has a wingspan of a bit over 51 feet. The production model could get up to about 690 miles per hour, so still quite fast for the 50s. And it could climb up to about 48,000 feet. The cockpit arrangement is very interesting on this. You have your pilot here in more or less a traditional cockpit, but it's offset to the right, and in the left, in this kind of lower dome, you have the radar or observer, and this is more or less a blackened kind of cave, and that was so you could more easily view the radar. So yeah, both were in ejection seats, both wore G-suits. It said that this was a pretty complicated plane to fly and had pretty convoluted controls. Had good performance for what it was, and it was quite modern. It had radar systems that were quite cutting edge. It would use the most modern missiles. It's worth noting that in 1960, de Havilland would be absorbed by the Hawker Siddeley group, and so this would be produced under the name for a while. Then in 1962, the prototype for what would be the FAW-2, the FAW-2, first flew, and then it went into regular service in 1964. The FAW-2 just had continual updates for missiles and so on and so forth. Electronic countermeasures were added. New, updates to the radar system, had better fuel storage, so on and so forth. And by 1966, all the older FA-1s were out of service, or at least mostly so. 29 FAW-2s would be newly made, with 67 of the older ones updated to the new standard, meaning 96 total FAW-2s would be used by the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy didn't really use this in combat. It was just deployed as kind of a show of force here and there. For example, in the Gulf and off the coast of Africa. But yeah, frankly, it was only in service a brief period of time. By 1972, it was retired in favor of the McDonnell Douglas FG-1 Phantom. And even that plane had a pretty short career in the Royal Navy because of changes. By the early 70s, most of the large carriers were being retired out by the Navy. In fact, only the HMS Rock Royal would be left to have the larger planes. And of course, by the late 70s, even the remaining large carriers would be retired. So even though this was retired out relatively early, the whole large Navy thing in Britain wasn't going to outlive it by much. Of course, then you get into things like the Sea Harrier, smaller planes operating off of so-called escort carriers. But so it's kind of a bit of a footnote plane, but I think design-wise it's very neat, very different from an American jet, but still has that modern 50s look. I think that Aviation72 did a good job. These come with removable ordnance. They have 2 missiles, 2 fuel tanks, and 2 just empty racks. So there's a total of 6 hard points on this plane. It does come with landing gear up and down. Yay. I don't like it when they just come down. I can tolerate only up, but down just bugs me for some reason. It's reasonably metal. I mean, the fuselage, the top here, all this is metal. Much of the tail is polymer, not surprising considering, kind of how it's made. And some of the bottom is polymer. I noticed that's what the Aviation72 tends to do. They'll kind of go with the more polymer belly on some. I know at least with that Javelin they do. But I thought I would just show you. It's a neat model. These are priced a little cheaper than Hobbymaster, but a little more than a lot of Corgis, but kind of like Corgis, really. And I'm not sure if Aviation72 is still in business. Their website, it looks a little on the defunct side, but I could be wrong. And I will tell you that not all of their planes have gear up or down or removable ordnance. Some of them are more of the older Witty style, so know what you're getting. Usually the ones with a part number in the 50,000s are the kind of the nicer ones, where the ones in the 20,000s are your more basic ones. But yeah, the Royal Navy de Havilland Sea Vixen. And again, kind of its progenitor over here, the Vampire. I was like, that's a neat plane. Alrighty guys, well if you have any questions or comments, please do post them below. If you could, like, share, and subscribe. And also check out some of my other videos. I will catch you very soon next time.